Hi everyone, Julia here from The Art of Creating, and I'm back again on the Crafty Maven Getaway channel with another process video. Today I'm making an art journal page for Art Party Friday, and here is the inspiration piece. What I wanted to do is do a spread in my art journal, which is a vintage book that I got for free just walking past a shop somewhere when I was on holidays quite some time ago, and I'm working gradually through my journal. What I do is the pages are already fairly thick for an old book, but I usually gesso them, and I usually glue 2 or 3 of them together to make the paper a little bit sturdier. I don't use a lot of wet media on it, like watercolors or spray mists, but with gesso and with acrylic paints, it holds up quite well. So I wanted to replicate a little bit of a scene on the inspiration piece and basically document a camping trip that I took a couple of days while I was on holidays not that long ago. And basically, I just wanted to create a bit of a scene near the water, a bit of a tent with the fire. I looked up some pictures on Google for camping illustrations, and I just saw some pictures of tents and just took, I guess, a very basic interpretation of it so that I could draw it. I'm not the best drawer or painter, so I wanted something really simple. So I just wanted to make this fun and easy and just play with paints and just enjoy the process instead of worrying to make something look really realistic. So for this scene, I have drawn a bit of a sketch on my papers just so I know where the elements will go and where I need to lay my paint. And for the water, I mixed up some blues with the black. I think there was a couple of shades of blue and the black. They're just your normal acrylic paints, nothing fancy. And for the sky, very similar idea, black, but I've added some purple into it just so that there is a variation between the water and the sky and to make the sky a little bit darker. And once I've done those two things, I decided to do my ground. So I'm sort of thinking that this is like a bit of a beach or a bit of a shore area close to the water, and the tent is sitting sort of near the water there. So you can see I'm leaving out a bit of a space for the tent, and I'm going to use orange color to color that in. I'm not the best at shading things. I'm not 100% sure how it all works. It's something that I need to practice a lot more, but I'm just trying to do some darker areas under the tent and around the tent, just to bring attention to it. Laying down some basic color for the tent silhouette, and then I'm just going to go in with darker colors and define the folds of the fabric and the opening of the tent and shading and things like that. So you can see I'm just using, to shade the tent, I'm using browns. And I'm also mixing a bit of purple into it as well. So I'm just going around defining the corners and just the different areas. And at some point I wasn't quite happy with how much color was on there. So what I do is I just clean off the brush, and while the paint is still wet, I'm just pulling off a little bit and fading it away and blending it into the other areas, and it just softens the edges and makes it not so stark, just standing out like that. And then what I found is when I've added, I think I must have added a bit of black. When I've added a bit of black, it was a bit too dark and just looked a bit out of place. So what my brush to try and take off some of that color, and it actually started moving color with it. So it sort of gave it a few like streaks, like there's creases in the fabric. So I just left it as it was. The fire was really fun to make. I wasn't sure how I was going to do it, but I just sort of gave it a go, and I really liked the result. So I've used two colors. First, I've used yellow, and I just made squiggly lines, sort of lifting the brush towards the end so that it's got like a fluffy brush stroke finish at the top of the fire. And I just done those squiggly lines in sort of like different directions, sort of going around, like wrapping around itself. Then I added some orange, and while yellow paint was still wet, it was dragging some yellow paint with it, so it started sort of mixing in together, and it just gave it like a multi-tone effect. Now I'm just going back to try and shade my tent a little bit more. So I was sort of going for shading a little bit intentionally because the fire is in front of it, so it gives off some light. So the areas behind the tent would be darker. So I'm sort of trying to replicate that. I'm not sure if I did a very good job at it or not, but I really like how it all came out. So I'm just sort of adding more to it, and I really liked how the flicks of the brush with like a little brush strokes at the end look. They sort of give it a slightly more sketchy, slightly more drawn look to it, and it just looked more interesting than a flat solid color. Just adding some more shading on the ground, some more shading here and there. I don't normally record my art journal pages. I'm not sure why. I think I generally need a bit more thinking about it and planning, and I'm usually not sure what I would do with it. What I normally do with my art journal pages is I create a background with mists or paints or whatever, and I would sort of see what I see in it and where it wants to take me, and then I would use a few elements that I like say I want to use up a few old stickers and things like that. I would lay that down into some sort of a composition and start adding a few more elements. Then I might come up with some sort of a sentiment or a quote from somewhere, or nothing. I suppose it doesn't really have to state anything super meaningful. Just I suppose it's a journal where you can play with your mediums and colors and things like that. So that's what I normally do. And in this case, this is a very unusual page for me because I've actually created a scene based on something, painted like an image, and I really enjoyed it. So I'll try to do some more of it. I suppose I'm usually just a bit scared to try painting on there without sort of preparation and practice and things like that. But for this one, I sort of gave myself permission to just give it a go. If it doesn't look realistic, it doesn't really matter. So yeah, I really enjoyed this process. So quickly here, I have done a few splatters of silver paint and then a few dots with the white paint pen. And off screen, I have written my quote, which was also in the inspiration piece, which says, "Never stop looking up." And I've done it off screen because I'm not the best at script writing or font writing, whatever you call it. So I really had to sort of like practice a bit and compare and then write it down. And then I sort of gone over it with my Smooch pearlescent paint and done it a couple of times just to get the color a bit darker, because when it absorbs into the paper it fades out a bit and I wanted it a little bit more opaque. And then I have taken some of my Power glitter paper, which is a really nice paper. It's fairly thin, or like it's thinner than those really thick ones, and the glitter doesn't come off. It's a really shimmery paper and the glitter is really stuck well into it. So I've cut a circle out of it, and then I've moved my punch a little bit more and cut another circle, which then became a half moon shape. Now I've taken my Jelly Roll by Sakura and I'm just going around defining a few areas, just basically sketchy lines to add a bit more interest, not necessarily to make it look like not sort of going around all elements as such to define them, but to add something extra to all of those elements. Just going around the water a bit near the ground there, which looks a little bit like sea foam, so I wanted to do that. Just going around a few other elements and around the actual letters as well. And that's pretty much it for my page. Just try it all up, and here's the finished product. I hope you enjoyed. Give me a thumbs up, and information about my channel and other social media are in the description box below. If you've got any questions, do leave me a comment, and have a nice day. Bye.